Hi everyone, welcome to the third of our live history tours here at the historic Duke Mansion here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are so glad you're joining us today for this, our third tour. I will go ahead and mention that if you haven't seen our first two, they are all located on our Instagram page. We go through the entire first floor and look at the entire living areas. Last week we went through the second floor, we explored the history exhibit and looked at some great bedrooms, and so be sure to go back and check those out if you haven't seen those yet. But we're super excited to have you with us today on know about it or don't know how to get up here. So we're thrilled to invite you on this little backstage journey today, and I encourage you to stop by at some point to see this for yourself. So if you missed the first tour, I believe I mentioned it, our house has 3 floors, 4 actually if you count the full-length basement, but our third floor was originally, when the house was originally built, our third floor was the staff's quarters of the home. So if you checked out our tour from last week, or if you go back and look at it, you'll notice it was a large, sprawling, beautiful hallway. Well, this is a beautiful hallway as well, but the third floor is a lot smaller. You'll notice that as we kind of walk through it quickly, but that's because, again, it was the staff's quarters of the home, and also because you're getting up towards the roof line. So you're going to see a lot of eaves and great architectural elements in these bedrooms up here that you don't necessarily have downstairs. But as I've said before, the bedrooms for overnight stay that we have on the third floor, they are in no way less charming than any of the rooms that we have on the second floor. As a matter of fact, I tend to like a lot of these rooms better because there's some great stained glass windows and eaves and arches and architectural elements that you won't get downstairs. So this is not going to take us long today, but we did want to give you a little kind of behind the scenes look at what's going on up here on the third floor. When you come up to the third floor, you're going to notice that there's a lot of pictures everywhere. That actually has only been around here for a little bit over a year. We are super excited to have partnered with Wells Fargo Private Bank to be able to put a history exhibit up here on our third floor. Already gotten a lot of great response, and as a part of that, the first large panels you're going to see, we have 4 large picture panels that were that I'll talk all about the gentleman who created the landscaping community that is Myers Park. That was Mr. John Nolan. You can kind of take a peek down the hallway, you can see 3, and right around the corner there's another one. These large exhibits are absolutely fantastic to give you a little bit of backstory and information about the Myers Park community. A lot of people know, if you're from Charlotte or from the Carolinas, you've probably heard of the Myers Park community, but we don't know the history of it. It goes all the way back to, I believe, 1911 is when he first started designing this community. One thing that you'll notice about Myers Park, if you look at pictures of it or if you drive through it, it's full of beautiful landscaping, full of large mature trees, and it's also a lot of your neighborhoods traditionally at that point in time in history in early turn of the century America, a lot of your neighborhoods and communities were built in a grid pattern, like a checkerboard. This one was not. If you drive through Myers Park or walk through Myers Park, you'll notice the roads and the sidewalks. He followed the landscape when he built this community, so they twist and they turn. It's kind of easy to get lost in Myers Park, and I've done it many times, but it's fantastic to explore and just enjoy the beauty of it. So this display talks all about that. John Nolan became a hugely popular landscaping designer for many different communities all over the United States. And this was one of his first projects. One of his first projects was to design Independence Park here in Charlotte. And the story is he took his finals off from school just to come down here and be able to plan that for us. So we're not going to go through all the details of each and every one of these displays, but I do want to point out our picture down here to the right. If you noticed on our tour, I believe it was last week, I mentioned that Mr. Duke, he let John Nolan and his team borrow his wagons to be able to bring full-size trees into the Myers Park community. This was over 1,000 acres of almost treeless fields when he first started creating this community. You can kind of see in this design here as well, there aren't a lot of trees in there. And so Mr. Duke noticed that. He thought, well, that's shade for another generation. Let's bring in full-size trees, and you guys can borrow my wagons that I use to create my hydroelectric energy dams to do it. So that's a little part that Mr. Duke played in that community, but we are proud and honored to be a part of the Myers Park community that Mr. John Nolan created for Charlotte. So I'm not going to go through all these again, but these are on our third floor. We do encourage you to come up whenever you're visiting with us to check all of these out. It's some great information here, and you definitely walk away learning something and just getting to enjoy a little bit more history of the fantastic neighborhood that is Myers Park. It goes all the way down the hallway, and then there's one on the far wall as well. It talks about his influence on the communities around here, how others started copying his style of work because it became so hugely successful. And he truly did create a beautiful, beautiful community here in Myers Park. Again, a lot of people don't drive through it because they're afraid of getting lost. I do encourage you to do that. Stop by and see our exhibit, but also just explore the neighborhood and see what it's all about. So you'll hear we have a little bit of thunder going on outside. It's a joy to be on the third floor of this mansion in the middle of a thunderstorm. So that adds a little bit of excitement to our tour today. So we're going to go around the corner and continue exploring the hallway. So if you hear some thunder or see some occasional lightning, that's what that is. It's a thunderstorm. So imagine, if you will, just a few years ago, looking down this hallway, and there was nothing on the walls. It was fine, but we decided just recently, again, to partner with Wells Fargo, a private bank, to make a history exhibit. The history exhibit that we went through in our parlor last week gives a lot of the history of who lived in this house and the contributions they made to Charlotte and the world. This floor, we decided to focus on pictures that gave a little bit of heart to the house. Not that the history exhibit downstairs doesn't, but we wanted you to see some great family photos that really aren't seen very much. So that's what we did with all the pictures up here. Let's start on this side. We have our Duke side over here. One thing that I mentioned in our very first tour is that Mr. Buck Duke was a tobacco tycoon. He and his brother Benjamin and his father, they were in the tobacco business. And one thing that made their tobacco so popular, in addition to the fact that it was just, people liked the way it was cured in the Carolinas, but it was that he would also oftentimes include, wow, that was a big strike of lightning, sorry. He would include trading cards with his cigarettes, with his packages of cigarettes. And they would contain anything from riddles to scientific discoveries to plants, but the ones that everybody wanted, the trading cards that were very coveted, was ones that featured starlets of the screen and the stage who were very risque and showing about 2 or 3 inches above their ankles. So that made his cigarettes really, really popular because people were buying them in many cases just to collect the trading cards. If you look on the opposite wall, we have a few pictures of the Coddingtons. The Coddingtons were another family that lived here. This was when, you'll notice a lot of these pictures, this obviously isn't from when the original Coddingtons were here. Back in 2015, we celebrated our 100th anniversary celebration. And a lot of these pictures where you see the families holding their family name, that was when we pulled them all together once again to celebrate together. I gave you some facts about Mr. C.C. Coddington last week, but 2 things to mention that I love about these 2 photographs is that I mentioned that he was the Buick dealer in the Carolinas at that point in time. It was a little bit hard during that time in history, during the 1920s, to get cars down here. So he purchased his own rail cars, and this is a picture of Mr. Coddington and all his rail cars with Buicks on them, so he could bring Buicks here to the Carolinas. Also, he was a big fan of cars, obviously, because he was one of the first co-founders of the original Charlotte Motor Speedway, which was originally located in Pineville, North Carolina. And you'll notice, one thing I love about this picture is you'll notice it was actually wood. The original flooring was wood for the Speedway, so that's a great shot. So we're going to continue on a little bit as well. I've mentioned Mr. Buck Duke's father, George Washington Duke. I don't think we've seen a picture of him, so we have a great photograph of him up here as well, and of the original Duke homestead as well. And if you visit with us, which I encourage you to do, there's a lot more information that I'm not talking about listed with each and every one of these pictures. I don't want to give that all away. I want to kind of tease it so you guys will come back and join us sometime for another visit to explore that for yourselves. Continuing on, this is an interesting section. Most of this side here is of the Duke family, actually the entire side of this wall. This is a great shot of Doris Duke, when she was very young, around 1914. And we do have a picture. I mentioned probably on our first tour, maybe last week, that Mr. Duke was married to Nanline Inman of Georgia. And a lot of times when I give different history tours here, people ask, well, where is she? Where are her pictures? And there she is. On our 3rd floor is one of the only pictures, actually, as far as I know, the only picture of Nanline Duke that we have here in the Duke Mansion. So that, of course, is a picture of her and Doris around 1913. It's a great shot. Doris, once again, was the apple of Mr. Duke's eye. They had a great father-daughter relationship. He and Mrs. Duke had Doris when they were older in years, so they were very, very close family, especially Doris and Mr. Duke. And I love this picture because it's recreations of actual a letter that Mr. Duke wrote to Doris. They would oftentimes share correspondences with each other, and that's actually a representation and a copy of some of that correspondence together. a great, I believe this is her debutante picture of Doris Duke. Very, very stunning, picturesque lady. And I think that's a great shot of her. Flipping sides to the other side of the wall, we have an exhibit that talks about the cannons of Cannon Mills fame. Again, this is a picture of all the cannons who joined us back when we had our 100th anniversary celebration. And there's some great pictures of some of the different Cannon kids that surround that shot as well. Sneaking on down the hallway, we have our next exhibit that's dedicated for the Lineberger family. The Linebergers, again, that's Clayton and Henry Lineberger. They were also people who owned the house. They're part of our history of homeowners here at the house. These are some great shots because they actually show pictures of the house as it looked when they were in it. For example, there's a picture of the solarium. If you see our solarium today, oftentimes it's empty because we use it for different events. But that shows it as it would have been used as a solarium. You can see our living room through there into the background. And the picture below is a great picture of our the dining room porch. It still remains on the outside of our dining room. However, this mural commissioned by the Linebergers, that beautiful tree mural, is no longer there. It's been painted over, but we love that shot because it gives a little glimpse in terms of what the house looked like actually when they were there. And I forgot to mention Baguette. Baguette was a member of the family too. He lived here as well. We've had a lot of different dogs that have lived here in the Duke Mansion. This is the room that, if you joined us for our tour on the second week, the Dixon Conference Room is what it is now, but it was the Lineberger bedroom. Sarah Lineberger, that's the room that she stayed in when she was living here, and that's also the room that it was Doris Duke's bedroom. So that's what we call affectionately the young girls' bedroom here at the Duke Mansion. Now, of course, it looks totally different because it's a media space for us. We'll continue on this side with the Rays. If you remember last week's tour, or just to give you an update, or a reminder, I should say, the Rays were the last actual family that lived here in the Duke Mansion, and they came here when it was actually first, it was broken up into condominiums, and they purchased the house and restored it back to the beautiful home that we have today. You can see some of the pictures. We love these because it shows them going through some of the renovations and the different stages of those renovations as they were turning it back into a home. And so those are fascinating to look at, just them walking through and seeing how the mansion was returned back to its former glory. And my favorite shot out of all those is, of course, the one on the bottom with the little toy car coming down the driveway. It's great to see. It brings a little heart to the home to show, wow, these really were families that lived in this beautiful house. And I just love that shot as Deanna Ray comes down the driveway. On the flip side, again, for the rest of the wall, this whole side is of the Duke family. And so you get to see, you heard me mention Duke Farms. They had many different residences. This was Mr. Duke's home away from home when he came to Charlotte, but they had Duke Farms. They had a Fifth Avenue penthouse. They had many different residences. And this is a picture of the Duke Farms as it looked in 1893. Doris also lived there and stayed there for a while. And there were many beautiful gardens that were there at the Duke Farm at that point in time. These are some great pictures of those gardens that were kept up and sadly don't exist anymore. This is another one of the residences in Rough Point in Newport, Rhode Island. Beautiful seaside home. This is where Doris Duke spent the remaining her last few years at this actual residence. Some great pictures of what it looked like on the inside. From what I understand, it still looks exactly like it looked while she was there. Today, it's restored as a museum where people can go and visit. And I haven't been able to go myself, but some of our employees have, and I've heard it's absolutely stunning. Doris Duke, funny story about her. Again, I mentioned at some point in our tours that she was a huge animal lover. When she was bought her own Boeing 737 airplane from a Saudi businessman, part of that deal was that he gave her 2 live camels. And so she had those camels, as you can see here, Baby and Princess. And these are topiaries now that are at Rough Point that represent both Baby and Princess, the camels. But it was always a big deal, and people knew when Doris was in town at this residence, because a lot of times she would put a tent outside for the camels, and people would come just to see the camels as well. Another one of her residences that I'm absolutely 100% jealous of is that she had a home in Hawaii. She called it Shangri-La. A beautiful, again, you can see oceanfront home. How horrible it must be to live there and have that view every day, right? It's absolutely stunning home, not only for the outside and picturesque location, but Doris Duke was a big fan of the performing arts and visual art. Specifically, she loved Middle Eastern art, Arabic art, and you can see by all these pictures that's exactly how she decorated this house. She had all kind of beautiful Islamic art as a part of this home, and it just kind of became such a part of the home that when Doris Duke passed away, this home became the Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Art, Culture, and Design, which was one of her last philanthropic legacies. You can still visit there today and see the home, but also just enjoy the fantastic art that was a part of this home that she was a very big fan of. And lastly, dry your eyes, we're coming to the end of our tour. One last little section. I did want to include this on the tour because the very first week you heard me talk about Mr. Duke's Wonder Fountain, the large water fountain that he had on the edge of the property that was popular because it shot water up 150 feet in the air, and also it was powered by a tube that was run all the way from the Catawba River. Well, this is one of the actual pictures we have. It's an overhead picture of, you can see the Wonder Fountain there in the corner. That's where we are. That's the Duke Mansion. And if you're familiar with the house, that's the terrace. And this is all the way coming down to the edge of the property to what, roughly this would be Queens Road down here. Again, if you missed the original tour, Mr. Duke, when he purchased this home, as you can see, he essentially bought the block and he put the Wonder Fountain on the edge of that property. He loved for people to come enjoy it. A lot of people, you can see the sprawling lands. A lot of people would just come use it almost as a park. And there's a person, this is a picture of a lady who was standing in front of the water fountain. We don't know who it is, but it's a wonderful shot of not only the fountain, but you can see the side of our Duke Mansion in the background as well. That would be our west side of the home. What's interesting is that with the Wonder Fountain, I mentioned that the piping ran all the way from the Catawba River to the fountain. Well, there are still areas in Myers Park where you can, when different construction teams are excavating, whether it's for homework or commercial work, whatever, you can still find pieces of the large piping going through the neighborhood. And to some people, it's quite a surprise because they think, what in the world is this pipe doing in this neighborhood? But it's a part of our history. It's a part of Mr. Duke's Wonder Fountain. So that's it. Some interesting shots of excavating some of the pipes from the Wonder Fountain, and you can see the shut-off valve from the Wonder Fountain as well. So that brings us to the end of our third floor tour. Again, if you stay with us or visit with us at any point in time, our third floor is always open for exploring. As always, though, we do recommend you check with our front desk because we are a historic inn and meeting place. We have meetings and events and weddings and teas and lunches. Something's going on almost all the time. So while we do encourage you and want you to come explore this great floor and all the stuff we talked about in these tours, do be sure to check with our front desk to make sure, just to see what rooms are available and to see what's going on. Otherwise, I know things are a little crazy right now during COVID times, but if you're interested in joining us, give us a call. We'll do anything and everything we can to get you in here to join us. If there are any other questions I can answer, please let me know. Also, if you go to our, I believe our link is in our bio about what we are and who we are as far as both the Duke Mansion and the Lee Institute, which are operated under the same nonprofit organization. Do some research into all that, ask us any questions you want, and we'll gladly get back to you. But otherwise, thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.